Weatherby, there was Castleton coming to challenge and take it up once again. Also Noel coming on the stand side, and if they got them too far on mark, didn't choose between the Castleton on the rail. Noel on the stand side, what's going on? Round is to be looking for the
Enquiry. I think you know. Yeah, I thought so, didn't you? Enquiry.
Number 6, second number 5, and 2. First number 6,
I know.
there is a Stewards Enquiry. There is a Stewards Enquiry.
The stewards hearing this inquiry are in the chair Lord Scarborough, Mr. Wrigley, and Lord Westbury. It's Hyde who rode the winner, number 7, Celestial Dancer, and Carson who rode number 9, Blue Emmanuel, placed 4th. Carson, you were on the outside, and it appeared to the stewards that you might have suffered a bit. Could you tell them what happened?
There was a little gap between myself and the horse. I think I finished second, and Head came on my inside and gave me a slight nudge as he came through.
And did it affect your chance?
I don't think I would have won. I don't think I was going to win.
Did it affect your placing?
It's hard to say.
Hyde, could you tell the stewards what happened?
On a horse that has to come late. I followed through behind the second horse and felt at the time I went from the challenge there was room between the second horse and Carson. Whether the second horse hung out, I'm not sure. See on the film. Thought there was room to go and I went to go. And as I went to go through Carson's horse, he will say my horse was hanging out and I say his horse was hanging on to me.
Will you point out Hyde?
That's me on the
That's
outside.
Hyde there, isn't it?
And Carson on the outside now.
And Carson there and Hyde there. Back that again, son.
Yes, please, and slow. Okay.
So that's Carson and that's Hyde in behind.
Yeah.
Would you like that again, son?
No, thank you.
I think the second film illustrated my feelings better, so that there was room when I went to go, and probably the second horse has tended to drift away from the stands a little, which has made things tighter than they would have been if he'd kept straight. There would have always been just enough room for him.
Carson, any comments
Yes, sir.
on your season film? Would you mind waiting outside? I imagine we're all three agreed that there was definitely interference.
Certainly.
Without a shadow of doubt. And the next thing we have to decide is, was it accidental? In my view, I don't know what you two think, is that no way was it accidental.
There was no gap.
You did
I
mention
also think that Carson's horse kept a straight line. We saw it.
the film showed clearly that it was an absolute dead straight.
What do you think, David?
Yes, I agree entirely.
And it seems to me that he knocked Carson really pretty badly.
So if you agree that the riding offence took place,
Well, then we come to this list, don't we?
you've got no option but to disqualify and put him last.
He's got disqualified and placed last. It was worse than careless riding, wasn't it, David?
It definitely, in my opinion, reckless.
Do you agree it was reckless, Michael?
Absolutely, yes.
That's his first
That's
offence.
his first this season.
Yeah,
But for a senior jockey, it's 10 days, isn't it, Peter?
yeah, afraid so.
Well, there we are. But I think it's a very clear-cut case, in my view.
I agree with you.
Yes.
Hyde and Carson, the stewards have considered this. They find that there was interference. they find that you, Hyde, were guilty of reckless riding. Your horse is disqualified and will be placed last. And would you please come back after the next race? Thank you very much.
This 10-day suspension could cost jockey Edward Hyde £3,000 in lost riding fees. He has infringed one of the rules of racing, rules laid down and enforced by the most powerful private club in the world. The Jockey Club rooms at Newmarket, where a full meeting is taking place. For 230 years, this self-elected club of only 110 members has totally ruled British racing. Yet it administers and disciplines an industry on which the public bet each year almost £3,000 million, more than is spent on the nation's social services.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, before signing the minutes, I'm sure that members would wish to record their congratulations to Mr. Dick Saunders on his magnificent win on Griffard in Grand National.
Members of the club now include a few working farmers, like Dick Saunders, and a rich sprinkling of industrialists with horsey interests. But nearly half its members still have aristocratic origins and handles to their names. The Jockey Club evolved rather casually from a collection of well-breeched gentleman riders. They wished merely to organise their own private sport for their own personal benefit. By last century, it was in full command of the turf. It was already exclusive, and its prestige was even further enhanced by royal members. To be a member of the club became a pinnacle of social success. Even 30 years ago, when the club was half its size, getting elected was something of a mystery.
You weren't even asked. I mean, you were simply told. And you were supposed to be so honoured that you accepted. I was here in 1952, I think. It was exactly 30 years tomorrow, in fact. And Lord Rosebery, who'd never spoken to me in his life, came up to me and said, your name's coming up for the club tomorrow, and Humphrey de Trafford will second you. I'd never spoken to Humphrey de Trafford either. So I said, thank you very much, and that was that. And when I was elected then with the present Lord Abergany as a friend of mine, and we both appeared outside this building here. Neither of us knew where it was. We'd never been inside it. We hadn't a clue about the whole thing. But that's how it was done in those days.
I very much regret that it has been virtually impossible.
Till very recently, there was no place in the club for the great professionals of the sport, like top trainer Sir Noel. Outsiders were ruthlessly blackballed.
This ballot box here, you can see you put your hand in the top and it says yes on the left and no on the right. So nobody can tell when they're holding it which way you dropped your thing. And on the inside, there are two drawers. And so all the senior steward had to do was to pull out the one under no and see if there was anything inside it. And I've forgotten how many black balls were required, but there was a sort of set rule about it. And these sort of little things here that you put in. One ghastly occasion, I remember, when the only thing you had to remember, of course, was to empty those things before the ballot box went round. And I was standing up there and waiting for some gentleman to be elected, and I opened the no, and the thing was absolutely crammed full of these things. You see, what I should have done was to said, I'm afraid there's been a mistake, and do it all over again. But I was so frightened. I said, Mr. So-and-so is elected, so I've never known to this day whether he was or wasn't. I'm sure he was probably all right, really.
Now, I'm sure...
In those days, being all right probably meant having blue blood and a taste for port and idleness. But the rise of the betting levy board and public opinion mean that members today are picked for the work and knowledge they can contribute, and none receive a penny. A senior steward, like Captain MacDonald Buchanan, works 4 unpaid days a week for the 3 years of his elected stint. Johnny MacDonald Buchanan came into racing via point-to-point riding and local racecourse stewarding in the Midlands, where he farms 3,000 acres.
Well, this is a pretty good lot. So how many more you got to do, Bob?
Just over there.
I think you have to realise that if you're asked to do it, you have to think rather deeply about it. You have to think why you're going to accept, if you are going to accept, what you think you're going to achieve, and whether you can help racing. having done that, you accept, and after that it becomes a duty, in my opinion.
First, on the sponsorship of the classics. As the paper says, we have been under some degree of pressure over the last year from the horse racing.
The private family firm of Weatherby and Sons has for 2 centuries exclusively minded and managed all the Jockey Club's business. They produce the Turf's Bible, the racing calendar. They own the stud book. A Weatherby is the hereditary secretary to the Jockey Club. The present incumbent is Simon Weatherby, racing's top civil servant. Somewhat surprisingly, the headquarters of this powerful firm are neither in Newmarket nor London. The computerized control centre of all racing and breeding lurks behind an industrial estate on the outskirts of Wellingborough. Each year, 500,000 racing entries are accepted here, and declarations are made for the 64,000 runners in 6,000 races.
Good morning. Hello, Mr. Balding. Comes to equation number 8, Dr. Fusus, from the Eastern Arms Novices Hurdle, market racing tomorrow.
3, 2.
Those horses still in the running take their first gamble on a bingo machine, still the best way of making the draw for the starting position. Out go all the runners to the racing pages of the nation's press and the earnest study of the ever-hopeful punters. These common gypsy ponies outside Weatherby's have as much chance of getting their handicaps coughed up by the firm's computers as their owners have of being elected to the Jockey Club. Blue bloods only here, and all their births, marriages and deaths must go through these offices. Even the colours they will carry must be approved, and every spot and blemish recorded on passports to be carried throughout their lives. Within the constantly amended pages of this vast book are registered the names of our 22,000 living thoroughbreds. One important racing owner reserves her personal selection of future names for the horses she breeds. Every aspect of breeding and racing is administered by Weatherby and Sons, and the owners pay for it. But how far does the power of this extraordinary family firm extend over the Jockey Club itself?
I know Woodrow Wyatt has described me as the hereditary Prime Minister, but I don't think I'd put it quite as strong as that. My own role is a permanent secretary, if you like, in civil service terms. I'm in control of all the whole administration of the Jockey Club. I'm there to coordinate the activities of all the people, all my team who work around me. I'm also there to advise the stewards on policy, and in particular, I'm there to give advice to the senior steward on whatever matters he consults me, whether it's political or dealings with the levy board or racing problems, or, for instance, to advise him on appointments to Jockey Club standing committees, which is now an important part of the job. I mean, when I watch Yes Minister, I must say I see a lot of comparisons between myself and the civil servant in Yes Minister, and a good deal of comparison, I suppose, between the minister and the senior steward, although I think my present senior steward is a good deal more forceful than the minister in the film.
Captain Donald Buchanan, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, may I just put a point?
The Jockey Club runs the business of racing, but to some extent it is still an upper-class club. On race days at its Newmarket headquarters, members and those lesser mortals who belong only to the rooms can meet together, surrounded by the portraits of the famous racehorses owned by their predecessors. Pictures now worth many millions of pounds. Earlier Jockey Club members, often a scheming bunch of reprobates, met together in London coffee houses. One was that controversial aristocrat, Lord George Bentinck, ancestor of Lord Howard de Walden.
He was one of the great reformers of the turf. I mean, he may have been a pretty sharp gentleman. which he was. But he did bring in the reforms like the start, for instance. In the early days, they used to just say, go, 1, 2, 3, go. And a lot of people used to sort of deliberately have false starts so as to get the horses all excited. I think there's one occasion where they had 30 false starts for the Oaks or something. In those days, the winner of a race used to give the judge a present. Well, that can hardly have been conducive to fair play. But I think he's tried to stop all that.
Admiral Rouse, the turf's next great reformer, brought naval discipline to regulate the sport. He devised the scale of weight for age, which led to modern methods of handicapping.
His great saying, at least the one I like the best being a racehorse owner, is keep yourself in the best company and your horses in the worst, which I think is about the best sort of thing you could say to anybody owning racehorses.
Racehorse owners in the Jockey Club rooms today do keep good company and are constantly reminded of the glories of their past. Here's a salver presented by King George V. The hoof of the famous horse Eclipse always stands gold-mounted before the most senior member present. At this card table, where fortunes changed hands, a player with hopeless cards would throw them in, refusing to buy another candle for his corner. The game's not worth a candle, he would groan.
This object in front of me here is the tail of Gladiator. The first, I think, really good horse the French had. Once upon a time, I said to Lester Piggott that we might end up by having his skin here in a glass case, but I hope that doesn't happen for a long time anyway.
In this room, the stewards sat omnipotent in judgment. One day, a snoring steward woke and pointed at the accused. "You're a villain, sir," he shouted, then nodded off again. Here, on the mat, was where the wretches stood.
I remember one terrible occasion. I've forgotten exactly what it was about, but this rather sinister man came in, and I had to do that awful thing of warning him off. Well, warning off means warning off Newmarket Heath, which means that you can't go on any race course at all, and it's the end of your career. It's not about fun doing, I can tell you. But it transpired, I discovered afterwards, that this gentleman came in thinking that he was going to be given a license to train. He went out, warned off for life.
How life has changed. Now, Lord Fairhaven shares his stately home with the public through the National Trust.
So you can tell all the other residents that, yes, Fairhaven, you get that.
And the Disciplinary Committee, which he heads, does its very best to be fair.
We need the wisdom of Solomon on occasions, but every person who has appeared before the Disciplinary Committee when questioned by the press has always said, with one accord, we received a fair hearing. They may not actually agree with the punishment which was meted out to them, but they are all quite agreed that the hearing was fair.
Serious infringements of the rules are sent on by the local racecourse stewards to the Disciplinary Committee sitting in London's Portman Square. It's like a case being sent by the magistrates up to the Old Bailey.
Mr. Richardson, Smith Eccles.
Smith Eccles, so that you know who we all are. On my left, Major General Sir James Dalrymple Goldsmith. On my far right, Mr. Jenks. My name's Fairhaven. And on my immediate right is Sir Charles Russell, who's here to advise us on legal matters. Colonel Ingalls, would you introduce the video, please?
This is the video head-on, and Smith Eccles is in green colours, and his horse has a white breast strap.
Steve Smith Eccles, a leading national hunt jockey, has been reported to the committee by the Newbury stewards for improper use of the whip. The stewards have given their evidence, and Smith Eccles, accompanied by his solicitor, has admitted a breach of the rules. In this case, it's not how often he hit his horse, but where, as the veterinary officer demonstrates.
I've outlined an area behind the saddle, which I would think is particularly sensitive and shouldn't be laid on by a whip. The darker areas are the more sensitive. On the diagram on the right, you will see an arrow pointing at the fold of the flank, which had 3 or 4 quite large blood blisters or wheels, which were coalescing when I saw the horse being unsaddled.
Riding and finish comes automatically. You know, you don't really give it any thought as to where you're hitting the horse, which you usually hit it on the quarters.
It's an instinctive thing that you go through when you're riding a finish.
It is. You're concentrating on other things and keeping the horse straight and whatever. You never really give it much thought.
Well, what are you going to do about this not happening in the future?
Well, I think basically I'll have to give it thought.
I mean, you've had a month now since this was referred to Portman Square. I mean, have you been placing a little more concentration on your use of the whip and getting it in the right place?
In actual fact, I have, yes.
After Newmarket inquiry, I think you said that Secretary General was light-skinned and marked easily. Can you say a bit more than that?
Some horses are like that. I mean, some horses you can really give a good whack to and you wouldn't even ruffle the skin. I suppose, I mean, humans are like that too.
Thank you very much indeed. Would you wait outside, please?
The hearing has lasted more than half an hour. Inside, the committee considers its verdict. If Smith Eccles gets suspended, he will lose a lot of money in riding fees and winning presents. He hopes he will only get a fine.
Sit down.
The Disciplinary Committee of the Jockey Club inquired on the 20th of April into a report from the Newbury Stewards concerning improper use of the whip by S. Smith Eccles, the rider of Secretary General. The committee, taking into account that this was Smith Eccles' fourth offence within the previous 12 months, imposed a fine of £400. You may go, thank you.
Thank you.
Jockey Club justice has been seen to be done in this case. But is the club's overall control of racing fair to everyone? After all, the punter bets £8.5 million every racing day. His cash, collected by the levy board, supports the industry. Is he satisfied that the self-elected Jockey Club is the right body to protect his interests? But it's not only the punters. The careers of 1,000 trainers and 1,000 jockeys lie in their hands. Racing's rulers have their prominent critics. A very successful owner, Sir Foster Robinson, was 84 before he got elected to the Jockey Club, as his grandson recalls.
Well, I think it was rather the thing at the time. If you weren't in a particular clique, they only liked people to become members of the Jockey Club who really weren't going to get in their way or disturb the equilibrium. And as he said to me at the time, I could have done so much for the club 10 or 15 years ago, and now it's too late. And after he'd been to his first meeting, I asked him how it had gone, and he said, well, nothing very much was done because we seemed to spend most of the meeting debating who would sit in old so-and-so's chair who'd just passed away.
The Jockey Club representative of nobody. They are a self-elected club who elect their own members and then appoint some of those members to rule racing. There isn't anything less democratic than that.
Self-elected bodies here who behave as if they have all the powers of Parliament, the Church, and the judiciary here are not always going to find in the modern world the veneration that they did a generation or so ago.
I'm a total believer in professionalism, and I don't believe that the Jockey Club will always necessarily have the correct people available, given the time, the enormous amount of time it takes, the work. It's totally a demanding job.
Shortly after George Wigg got in, he was asked to go to see the Jockey Club, which he agreed to do, and he went along to the offices of Portman Square. And he told me to his amazement, the commissionaire, when he told him that he was Lord Wigg, said, "Oh, you're for the high jump."
And when I got there, it was to find all the old aristocracy in a semicircle, and me sitting on a chair in the middle, as if I was being court-martialed. and General Fielden, voicing the views that he thought should be made known to me as chairman of the levy board, said, look, you're misunderstanding. Your job is to raise the levy, and it's for us to say how it's to be spent. So I said, right, well, what that means in effect is this: that for me, the plebeian task of going around raising the cash, for you, the aristocratic one of spending other people's money. Well, let me tell you here and now, I've come today, but I'm never coming again.
Hello.
It's suffering from the same complaint as the Dinosaurus. And
If you're looking for a cooker that's pounds lighter, then look in your gas showroom. We've got some of the lightest prices. For instance, at £199, there's the Valor Corvette 3. At £269, the luxurious Maine Gemini. And at £319, the magnificent Flavel Sable Plus S. All including delivery and fitting, plus quite a few others that save you pounds and pounds. Cookers that are pounds lighter, that's the beauty of gas.
Another big Bollum bargain. 2 top coats clean for the price of 1. The lower price garment clean free. All this week at Bollum.
It takes 10, just 10 minutes and then just feel fresh and clean once again.
In 10 minutes, Stewards Deep Clean makes stains and tartar disappear, leaving dentures clean and fresh.
It takes 10, just 10 minutes and then you're okay. Deep Clean sets you up for the day. It takes 10. It takes
Stewards Deep Clean, the 10-minute way to clean dentures.
It takes 10.
They've asked me to tell you about Dale steaks. They're in beef, lamb and pork. They're all 100% meat quarter-pounders. When you've got big, fussy people to feed, Dale steaks make a wholesome meal without making a hole in your housekeeping. Dale steaks in 100% beef, lamb and pork.
Bye, Mum. Call you next week.
Bye.
You know, I didn't think I'd be enjoying my motoring as much now as I did then. But now, of course, we're shielded.
We're what?
Royal Insurance. You know, the new Car Shield 50 policy. Wider cover, less worry, and we pay less.
If you're between 50 and 75 with a good driving record, ask about Car Shield 50 before you renew your motor policy.
If you value it, shield it with Royal Insurance.
The other evening, Mr. Kipling dropped in on our bell ringing practice. I like to ring the changes myself now and again, he said, unpacking some of his almond slices. Light, short crust pastry, a delicious almond and raspberry flavour middle, and a sprinkling of flaked almonds on top. They've asked for some of these on Saturday, said Mr. Kipling. And by the sound of it, it should be an exceedingly good wedding.
How does the Jockey Club reply to its critics? Is it still unprofessional, undemocratic, archaic? In the bad old days, it was certainly an outrageously autocratic institution.
The Jockey Club was simply everything. I mean, you ran racing, and that was the end of it. Whatever you said went, because there was nobody to talk about. But when the whole idea of the levy board and raising money from the public came, the whole picture changed, and we went through several sort of traumatic years, which I really needn't go into now. But now it's become much more, well, it's absolutely friendly arrangement between the Jockey Club and the levy board, who virtually run racing together. But of course they have slightly different views. They're bound to have at intervals.
Suddenly the Jockey Club realised there was another power in the land who controlled the money, and the Jockey Club were quite unused to that. And I think from then on, particularly under a chairman of the levy board such as Lord Whig, there has been terrific pressure on the Jockey Club to adapt itself and become really much more professional in the way it's organised. And this went on steadily and was very much accelerated, as I said earlier, by Lord Howard de Walden when he became senior steward, who organised the way the Jockey Club itself is run.
There are many more stewards because there are many more things to do. I mean, things become I hate saying it, because I hate saying it's an industry, because it's supposed to be fun, and I think that's what it's really about. But of course it is an industry.
Nowadays we are much more coherently organised vis-à-vis the outside world, Parliament, government and so forth, and in consultative processes than we ever were before. And this is a continuing process. I'm sure it's just going to go on. We adapt all the time.
The Jockey Club has certainly adapted itself to using modern methods. It has introduced starting stalls, the patrol camera, and the photo finish.
Just winner in.
The battle against dope is carried out by testing after every race. An official of the Jockey Club's associate company, Racecourse Security Services Limited, is dispatched to intercept the lad leading in the winner. Total compliance is required of the jockeys by the authorities, but not every horse does its duty by instantly producing a sample of its urine for the dope test. Jockeys, however rich and famous, are like schoolboys, absolutely subject to the rules.
Come on, jockeys, please.
Their livelihoods can be suspended, even eradicated by an adverse decision of the stewards.
Really, you want some form of continuity. But the steward or the starter?
No, it's the steward. Since the new regulation, you have to ask the steward for permission to send a lad.
Video King is clear of Killingham Clay and Pacific Spark.
What do you think, Dick? It was a pretty unscrupulous barge through, that wasn't it?
I think we've been having
Number 8.
Steward Enquiry.
Steward Enquiry, Steward Enquiry.
And Hyde's going right there.
Well, Malham's coming towards us right here.
And Mackay?
Now he goes right into Malham. He makes the gap.
Yes.
I don't think he touches him.
No, it was Hyde going out.
It was Hyde going out.
Yeah, it was Hyde
going out. Yeah. He came through the open gap.
He came through a gap.
Yeah, we have all three on
There are as many as 1,500 local stewards' inquiries every year, and any top jockey regards his involvement in them as part of the job.
Stewards are holding an inquiry into possible interference from about the furlong marker onwards. Now, Mackay, you rode the winner, Video King. And Hyde, you rode the fourth horse with this range. And Malham, you rode the third horse, Pacific Sparkler.
The stewards examine the patrol film again to see if anything happened to affect final placings. It seems that Ernie Johnson, in the lead, has slowed down abruptly, causing Mackay to swing out, which in turn pushes Eddie Hyde towards Madden. How do the stewards pursue the matter?
Hyde, were you aware you were going out?
Well, I was probably going to have a bit. I think something just in front of me ducked out as I was going out to peek out now.
Yes, I see. Yeah.
Mackay?
Well, sir, all I could say is that the leader was actually only Johnson, went very fast in the race, and he stopped very quick, so about a furlong and a half now, but just over a furlong to run, so I think everybody, he stopped so fast, everybody just ran up behind him.
Did he touch him? Not that I was aware, sir.
Did he touch Malum?
I don't think so, sir.
Did you touch Malum? I mean?
Not that I'm aware of, sir, no.
Did you touch him?
He didn't touch me, sir, but if I had kept going in a straight line, we would have collided.
Thank you.
Can you wait outside?
Wait outside, please.
At least the horse has reached a satisfactory conclusion.
Originally, I thought that Hyde had gone to the right because Mackay had gone to the right, but in fact, Hyde had gone to the right.
Before.
And that by going to the right, he opened a gap for Mackay to come through.
Yeah.
I don't think Mackay interfered with anyone.
No.
Yeah.
So, we do think there was interference. At least I think there was interference. Because Hyde took Malum out of a straight line.
Malum was pushed off a straight
But I don't
line
think it was
by
Hyde's
Hyde.
fault, do you?
No, but then
But what I mean is that there was interference, but it didn't affect the result because, in fact, Malum finished in front of Hyde anyway.
That is right. There was interference, but it was unintentional,
Accidental.
did not affect the result of the race. And the placing should
I
stay
think
unchanged.
all you need to say is the place
The place remain unchanged.
All right.
You can be.
The placing remains unchanged.
The urine samples are sealed for dispatch to the labs. The second sample is made available to the trainer in case the first test proves positive. In the 1960s, doping of racehorses, both to quicken and to stop them, reached such proportions that the Jockey Club engaged Bob Anderson, a former superintendent of the flying squad. He and his colleagues in racecourse security services regularly check suspicious moves in the betting market, which could indicate malpractices.
Oh, it's a ring inspector. Number 15, Hello Sunshine, opened at 20, has been back down in the ring to 12s. Thank you.
Bob Anderson recalls how the dopers worked.
They get a head collar, put it on the horse to hold him, and then they use this twitch, which is held above the upper lip, and then it's twisted in the form of a tourniquet, causing the horse, and it's a very painful thing, to open its mouth. Then they insert the ball. Now, the ball is a number of crushed tablets of drug, which in this case were Natensil, put into a piece of serviette, rolled up into the shape of a small sausage, and bound with sealer tape. Now, the object of that is to stop the drug being absorbed in the system at that time. There was one horse, which I was told about, but it was before my time, in that 1960 to 63 period, a horse named Rice Pudding. He was due to run at Lingfield. And they'd done him in his stable the night before, but he was a very strong, robust horse, that he must have shook off the effects of the drug because they all the dopers lost their money when he got up and won.
Since those days, the success of dope testing at these Newmarket labs has kept the dopers at bay. Racing authorities from a dozen countries now have their dope testing done here, and so defray the £500,000 a year they cost to run. They are considered the best in the world. Urine and blood samples are subjected to 3 modes of screening tests to register the most minute traces of prohibited substances. Last year, of 36 positive analytical reports, 25 were due to the contamination of a certain brand of horse feed. To prevent doping, racecourse stable security bars unauthorized entry. But there remains the threat of a ringer.
Okay, that's right.
The veterinary officer checks a horse against its passport. A newly arrived runner from Ireland.
American bred, well-travelled. Very good indeed. He's been over to this country at least 3 times before, that's right. That's right, let's have a look at his teeth. Thank you, Jay. Oh, that's right, he's got his central incisors there. Have a look at the neck. What have we got on the left side of the neck for? Well, they're high up there near the ear. That's it, up there. Oh, very, very accommodating.
But some ringers do happen. Bob Anderson recalls a notorious fraud, the switching of Cobbler's March, a good winning hurdler, with In the Money, a useless selling plater with broken down legs. Cobbler's March, once owned by a professional photographer, had disappeared from the records. The horse, alleged to be the hopeless In the Money, ran at Newton Abbot. In spite of his terrible form, someone suspiciously backed him down from 33-1 to 6-1. The obvious suspect was the trainer.
The race was run, and whilst it's a small photograph, you get some idea. It won by an official 20 length, but from this photograph, you can see him winning, and you can just see the other horses in the distance. The stewards had him in, and he gave an explanation that the legs had stood up to the treatment, and they accepted this. But we then received information that it wasn't the horse at all. So I went down 2 or 3 days later to the yard and saw this trainer and said, I'd like to see In the Money. He said, oh, didn't you know he broke down so badly after he won that I had to have him put down. I asked him where this was done. He told me at a slaughterhouse near Bristol. So I went to this slaughterhouse, saw the young man that had put the horse down. We searched among some skins to try and find the skin because, as you know, we knew he had one distinctive mark on his hoof, but the skins had gone and the carcass had gone to the continent. Well, that was our main problem now, to identify who was the winner. Luckily, again, we had some information. This was remarkable. The owner, the original owner, the professional photographer, had moved to Devon, and he had gone to Newton Abbot that very day with a friend of his. And while they were watching this race, he remarked that had he not known differently, he would have said that that was his old horse Cobbler's March running. And because of his interest, he kept snapping away at all these photographs. Well, that was our break. We then obtained photographs of the original Cobbler's March and the winner. And one distinctive feature, which was the trainer's undoing, and I'm sure it's why the jury convicted him, was a mark on the rump. It's known as the prophet's thumb or the mark of Allah. It normally occurs on the neck, very rarely elsewhere. And so taking the photograph of Cobbler's March here and the winner, known as In the Money, you can see that the indentation on each rump is identical. And at least the jury was satisfied. One other feature is, this is Cobbler's March, winning one of his races, and he has a white mark and little flecks of white. And the winner at Newton Abbot had been shaved. Now, the defence was that he injured himself on his box, but that was not accepted, and they clearly had shaved a section of his forehead there to remove the white flecks. Well, he was convicted and sentenced, and later warned off by the stewards for 20 years.
A Jockey Club sentence can be challenged. Its own disciplinary committee is racing's court of appeal. Royal jockey Willie Carson has been suspended for 3 days for careless riding by the local stewards at Haydock Park. He is appealing against that decision. As the camera patrol film is re-examined, we see Willie Carson on our right veer across the track to our left. Has he bumped another horse? Has his riding interfered with any of them? Carson's solicitor cross-questions one of the Haydock Park stewards.
Now, you say that you and your colleagues were not impressed with Ernie Johnson's evidence.
But it was very mixed up.
In what respect? I didn't follow your argument.
Slightly contradicts himself.
Well, let's turn to page 3 first. And at F there, you ask, did you touch? And Ernie Johnson replies, I did not think so. We came close. You're happy with that, are you?
Well, I would have thought he would have said, yes, we did.
Don't worry, you'll have your turn in one
He
moment.
admits after seeing the film that I think we brushed.
I don't think he does say that, in fact. Look at page 4, please, at F. And Ernie Johnson says, no, only that on the film it makes me look like my horse has just...
Slightly brushed me.
And it even looks to me as if he has slightly brushed me. Surely he's referring there to the film, because that's what he's going to say. He doesn't admit there, surely, that he actually touched Willie Carson's horse.
Carson challenged on the inside, and when he's originally made his challenge, there was probably room for one horse or even two at the widest margin between us. But as we've gone on for the next sort of 50 yards, his horse has gradually worked his way to be very close to me, but there was no contact at any time.
Mr. Wilson, as a local steward, you'll be aware of Rule 1512, will you? May I read it to you? The rider of every horse shall take all reasonable and permissible measures throughout the race to ensure that his horse is given a full opportunity to win or of obtaining the best possible placing. You're aware of that rule, are you?
I do indeed.
Is it fair, do you think, for me to summarize that subject to the rules of racing, a jockey must do his best to win? And we would agree with me that this incident took place between the furlong post and half a furlong out. In other words, it was a finish. And that at that point, Willie Carson's duty, under the rules of racing and to his connections, was to try and win that race. Would you also agree with me that the interference, if there was interference, had no bearing on the result of the race?
I agree that Johnson's horse, after the incident, had no chance of getting third.
Was it in your mind of yourself and your stewards then, and your fellow stewards, that he could have finished third?
He might have done if he hadn't been interfered with.
Yes, despite the fact that the evidence that Mr. Johnson gave to you was that I was not going anywhere, I was just staying on.
Yes.
You didn't accept what Mr. Johnson said there?
Yes, we did. Yes.
But yet a few moments ago you said...
Yes, I beg your pardon.
Which is correct then, Mr. Wilson?
We accepted that Johnson's horse was beaten.
My horse was tired, but still running, and I thought he was going to win. And I just kept riding, and he kept perfectly straight until he had come out of the pack of horses into daylight when he ducked across to the right-hand side. Seemingly the horse didn't want to win.
Can you explain at all why the horse didn't run straight?
Well, the horse was trying, really, to get in behind the winner.
What, you deduced that from your experience of riding?
Yes, well, the horse, he doesn't like going to the front.
Now, it is not only the jockey's riding which comes under scrutiny. It is also the judgment of one of the unpaid local stewards who gives his time to his neighbourhood course. He has had to make his original decision in a few minutes, aware of the impatient public on the course. The appeal has lasted over an hour. Carson appears confident. The local steward, less so.
Carson and sit down again, please.
The Disciplinary Committee of the Jockey Club on the 20th of April considered an appeal by W. Carson against the decision of the Haydock Park stewards to disqualify Satin Grange, placed second in this race, and to suspend Carson for 3 days for careless riding. Having considered the evidence, the committee found that the interference was accidental and that it had not affected the result of the race. They therefore sustained the appeal, overruled the disqualification and suspension. They placed Satin Grange second, Mad Money third, and Prince Warren fourth. Thank you.
Excellent.
Would you stay behind for one moment, please? I'm very sorry we have to disagree with you, but we were absolutely unanimous in our verdict. It comes, I can assure you, very, very hard upon us to have to make a decision where we disagree with local stewards, because our job is...
Why should anybody want to be a steward?
Well, I mean, I think they're all people with a background of tremendous involvement in racing, and I think that it's like any other public service. They have a great interest in and a great sense of duty about it, and there's nothing to be gained by it, except probably quite a lot of abuse. But I mean, I might be an example. I think they feel it's a duty. I don't think there's any feeling of power about it. And I mean, particularly the local stewards on the race courses, I mean, I have to take my hat off to them.
The Jockey Club, with its tight control over racing, has grown up gradually and in a very English fashion from an almost accidental start. Amateur, illogical, and it elects itself. Couldn't there be a better way of running racing? Could the government do it?
Governments of every complexion have made it quite clear that they don't wish to become involved in the day-to-day running of racing. Certainly not beyond the conception of the levy board dealing with finances. My experience of the last few years, particularly with trying to help to get the horse racing advisory body off the ground, is that there are so many different associations, so many vested interests, all of whom I don't say are in conflict, but they find it very difficult to come up with one answer. I don't think they could run racing, I really don't.
Up until very recently, in the Jockey Club, no way would they have had a film made about them. I mean, they've been terrified to death of it. But I think we suddenly came to the conclusion that people didn't know much about the Jockey Club. And we felt that we had nothing to hide nowadays at all, and we've got a very great deal to be proud of. And therefore, why not let people know about it? I mean, we feel we've done quite a lot of good work in the last few years. So let's for once in our lives, say it.
A distinct reluctance to change has been noted by the club's critics and even by its own members. But goaded from the outside, it seems to be accepting progress. Could it be that from its unlikely start, it is now galloping on strongly towards the 3rd century of its existence?
Next week.